In this video, I'm going to show you how to make a toque with a Triforce graphic in it. You can use these techniques to make any other type of graphic that you want. In this particular case, I have used size 7mm straight knitting needles, scissors, and a knitting yarn sewing needle. I also highly recommend that you use a crochet hook, as I could only do the finishing with a crochet hook, though it is not absolutely necessary to complete this toque with one. You definitely have to have two different colors. In this case, I have dark green and yellow. To complete the finishing, I also had dark yellow and light yellow, but you don't have to have those either. All right, so to make this toque, you're only going to need two colors, which pretty much means you only need two yarn balls. But in this case, because we're going to make 3 triangles, and one of the triangles needs a separate yarn ball, it'll make sense when I actually show you how I do it. I've taken a little bit of my giant yellow yarn ball and turned into a little yarn ball. Simple as that. So to prepare for this toque, I have begun the ribbing already. I have made the ribbing out of 52 stitches. And as we remember from the earlier videos, you make ribbing by going knit, purl, knit, purl, knit, purl, every 2 stitches until you get to the end. And the reason it's 52 is because 52 is divisible by 2 and then by 2 again, which makes it even. So if it was 50, it'd be 25, so both ends would have the knit side, and I didn't want that. I wanted them to be opposite. So what we remember about our pattern is that it is 19 stitches wide. So with those 19 stitches, 52 minus 19, or 52 minus 20 essentially, is 30. So we're going to knit 15, and then the graphic, and then whatever's left. And it'll just be knit stitches. (14) and 15. So what you can see is that we're in the middle of a purl, so I'm going to add a 16th knit, and now we are starting on a knit again. So pull them way down the needle so you don't lose them. And now let's grab our yellow yarn. So make sure that this is coming from the big yarn ball instead of the little one, because this will turn into the top triangle as well later. Okay, so you take this, and you tie it to the lead off yarn. And now you see why I wanted you to pull it all the way down the needle, so that it doesn't fall off while you're doing this. Granted, usually when I do this, it's sitting on my lap. But I can do it this way to show you guys. And I'm making a wreath knot because it tends to be stronger, tends to not unravel as much as a granny knot does. And then one more for good measure. Okay, so this is how you do it. How I'm going to do this is I'm going to knit the bottom 19 of both directions with this thread, this yarn, and then make the rest of the triangle with the other ball that I created. So take your lead off yarn and you just knit it like normal. For the first one, only the first one. Can't stress that enough. Only knit like normal for the first one. All right, so this is how you do it. I can't describe it, so just watch. Put that over, take this, and then you put it over top of that so that when you knit it, it's knitting around the green. And the reason you want to do that is so that you don't have to have separate green balls of yarn too. And I've done it that way before, but I prefer to do it this way because that way yellow is a lot easier to see through, long story short. So it looks like it's all kind of part of the same thing, whereas in other times when I've done it separate like that, you can kind of see through the yellow and it looks a little bit off. Not bad, just off. Granted, I'm probably the only person who noticed that, but there you go. All right, I'll show you again. Upside down like, so you can see what I'm doing. Take the lead off, you hold it in your fingers. You take the green, which you're not actually knitting with, you're just looping around the yellow, put it over top the yellow. Over top the yellow like that. Take the yellow, and then you knit it like normal. There you go. And make sure that your tension's all good. When you're actually doing it, it's actually a lot easier than how I showed you. So you just bring it over top, and then make sure when you're knitting it, you're knitting around the green. So the green comes with your yellow. And this is the way you do it when you have a small graphic. Now, if you're going to make a huge garment with a whole bunch of different patterns in it, then you can do it where instead of looping it like this, so you have like the green coming with the yellow, you just kind of have the green and the yellow be separate. So let's say I was making the Triforce gigantic, like 3 times as big as this. Then I'd do it that way because it just doesn't make sense to loop the green like this. And the reason why I'm looping the green with the yellow instead of just having the green be behind the yellow and then knitting with it again later is this doesn't get caught. It's all kept inside there, and it actually is a little bit knitted, so it'll stretch better. Not as much as normal knitting, but it will still stretch a little bit. So, green over yellow. The downside to this technique is it gets tangled and you have to untangle it. No, there's no way around it. Let's see how many we have so far. 5, 10. We have 10, so we have 9 more. You can actually see it already curling around like that. So let's see what we got now. 5, 10, 15, 16. So I have 3 more. You can see how I'm kind of losing length on here. All right, so one more check, because I think I'm at 19 now. So 5, 10, 15, 19, perfect. So now we don't need to knit with the yellow at all. I still recommend doing one more loop over the yellow, even though we're doing it with green, because that will make it go together a lot nicer when we come back. All right, so green over yellow, instead of underneath the yellow, and just normal knitting. You can begin a graphic pattern from the purl side. I just don't recommend it because it'll confuse you. It'll play with your brain. You don't want that. All right, so See, it's all tangled, which is normal. So there you go. You've got your first 19 stitches of the Triforce. So you can see it from the other side. Doesn't look nearly as yellow because I've been looping the green around, and you can see it. There's the green looped around in the yellow, but not coming with the actual stitch. I will do the other direction, and then I will come back and show you how to implement the other yarn ball. Gotten to the point where I'm just about to start knitting on the pattern again. So let's go back to our pattern and see what we need to do next. So essentially, we've just done this line, and then I did this line off camera because it was really easy. So I'm just going to show you how to both kind of continue up in this zigzag pattern, and then at right here, I'm going to add in the other ball of yarn. So the main big ball of yarn is going to make up this bit, and then continue up and do this whole thing like this. And then in the center here, it's only going to be green. All right, let's do that. So, while I was off camera, I did this because it was part of the pattern. So it was exactly the same way I did the knitting of the row below it, but instead of knitting this yellow, I knitted it green to begin the bottom of the inside triangle. All right, so as you probably guessed, it's pretty simple. The pattern called for this next bit to be green instead of yellow. So pull the yellow nice and tight because you don't want the gap to be there. And then just knit it. Not much harder than that. And just like the other one, you have the, except for in this case, you need to make sure that the green goes underneath your yellow. So, and there's the first stitch of the third line. All right, so take the green yarn, go over the yellow. You know this spiel by now. So now we're coming to the end of this particular yellow row. There you go. Now we're going to knit green on top of this yellow, on this green, and then this yellow. So you take the yellow and then you put the green over top of it just like before. And then you just knit just like normal. So you've got your 3 greens, just as the pattern goes. So now at this point, what you do is just like how we began way at the bottom here. Shadows. So you can see right at the bottom here, we're going to do the same thing, but with the second ball of yarn. Just knit like normal in the first stitch, and then take your green, make it go over, then knit. Green going over, then knit yellow. Keep doing that until you're 1 away from the edge. Knitting is one of those things that makes a lot more sense when you're actually like doing it with your own hands. So I implore you to follow along these tutorials with your own knitting needles. That way you can have your very own Zelda hat. Okay, now we're at the end. So we're just going to unravel as much as we can without having to actually like put our knitting down. And then you just knit like normal. And then you go all the way to the end. There we go. We have our third line of stitching. All right, so I'm going to show you how I do them from the purl side. It might make a little more sense. So you bring your green over top of your yellow. Pull it nice and tight because this can get really loose on you. And then just keep going until you get to the edge. This is the side with the little ball that we made. This would also be on our pattern, drawn on graph paper, the fourth line. It's very, very important to keep that in mind, what line we are on our pattern. Because if we forget that, then it can get very confusing. Trying to find it again, especially. Okay, so we're done with the yellow, so we're just going to do the green for 3 stitches and then start on the other side with the other triangle. So, oops, it's a little bit tight, there we go. 2, 3. And now for the other side. Again, pull it nice and tight because it kind of gets loose on you. And it's kind of falling off the needle on me. All right, gotta be very careful of that because that will totally happen to you, and it's even more confusing when you have this whole configuration going on. All right, so like that. With this particular pattern, because we are doing the zigzags by 2s instead of by 1s, the purl side, you don't add or remove anything. It's just knitting just like the other side. All you're doing is continuing it on. And then our last one. And then, got a little bit tangled at the end of the needle there. And then purl all the way to the end. So there you go. That was line 4 of our Triforce pattern. And this is what it looks like on the purl side. Very ziggy-zaggy looking. I finished knitting the entirety of the bottom, and I've cut away the extra ball. So here's the string that used to go to the extra little ball. I did not, however, cut off the string that goes to the big yellow yarn ball. So now, because we're following our pattern, we have done the bottom 2 triangles. Now we have to do the one top triangle. And if we're following the pattern very closely, as we should be, we notice that the top of this yellow doesn't continue up like it had been before. So we're going to knit green, green, and then a full line of yellow. And this full line of yellow will be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Also, in the case of this pattern, we'll know it's the end because the other yellow will be right here. But don't always rely on that because somewhere you could have goofed up your count. So it's best to double check both ways because knitting is hard to fix if you've done some big hiccup. But it's always just a hiccup. It's never the end of the world. It's just a hiccup. All right, so let's knit those 2 green that we have to. So knit, knit, and then start the whole new top triangle. So now you see why we only had to have 2 yarn balls instead of 3, because this one just continues on. So make sure the green is going over this direction, and then you got your yellow string, and then knit. And then just like the rest that we've been doing, just make sure that the green goes over top of the yellow, and then the yellow, you knit it, you bring it up, and you knit it over. All right, so just do that until you get to the tip of the left triangle. And then your last one, which is the green and then the yellow. We don't want to knit a yellow to this yellow. We want it to be green at the top because that's how our pattern is. Always, always follow your pattern, whatever it is. And I'm talking about the pattern you've drawn out, not a traditional knitting pattern, because those are confusing and make no sense to me a lot of the time, even myself. And sometimes they just don't work. Sometimes it's better just to kind of go and do it. All right, so before we finish using the yellow, we need to tie off this yellow so it doesn't unravel. So I recommend tying it to the other yellow because it's less clunky if you do that. Now we knit this with green. And there you just continue that to the end, and then just like the other two triangles, you finish this triangle all the way to the top, and then I will show you how to kind of finish that off.